Hi, I'm Brad Mathias. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Infinity Music Distribution here in Nashville, Tennessee. Well, everybody gets into the Christian music business the same way. God drags them in, typically. You either wake up, with a voice that everyone wants to hear, and your pastor in music says, "Hey, man, you are talented, you're gifted, you're anointed. You've got to go minister to people. Head to Nashville." And that usually happens in their later teenage years or high school or early college. And that didn't happen to me at all. I can't sing a tune or play a tune or hit a note in any way. So God obviously had a sense of humor, putting me in a place of responsibility in Christian music. My background came from going through medical school. That's what got me prepared for the music business. I guess the more I get to know God in my personal life, the more I begin to see the humor in His will. He calls people to do things that are completely dramatically different than what we think God's called us to do. And I'm no different than, say, Saul, who became a Paul, or Jacob, who became Israel. I used to be a doctor. I guess technically I still am. I did have a practice for many years in Central Illinois. And I was a chiropractor who went on to medical training in Florida, University of Florida Medical School in orthopedics. And I taught and practiced for almost a decade in private practice. 6.5 years ago, when my marriage was pretty much toast and my life was a mess, God got a hold of my heart and I became a born-again believer. And when that happened, I began to look at my life differently. I started to think of things from God's perspective, to actually go and inquire of Him before I made decisions. And God led me through a series of very specific events to the Nashville area, and took advantage of my background in business, which I had slowly built as a practicing doctor, in investing in entertainment companies. So as I'm investing in entertainment companies and getting to know the music world from a business point of view, God had a hold of my heart. So He connected those two about 6 years ago in Nashville, and I got involved in executive management of distribution. Well, I could give you the textbook answer, which is something like, we are the retail representation of each label and or independent record. As it gets from the studio to the shelf, we pretty much handle all of those details. In the real world, we move widgets. We move widgets from one warehouse to another warehouse, and they take it from a warehouse and put it into a store. And it sounds simple, but it's actually a pretty complex process, which requires a significant amount of time, energy, expertise, and a fair amount of money. Well, Infinity's got a really couple of unique advantages to the industry from, say, what other models are doing. Of course, the music world is a little bit upside down right now. Digital technology has affected our traditional mode of retail sales, which is a CD. Digital media has really expanded both online and retail forms of product. You can go into a Starbucks today and see a plastic piece that has a free download, or you can buy an entire album, which is just simply a tray card with a nice sticker on it that has a code on the back, and you can download that and get a full album online. All the way to the fact that there are companies now in our retail stores where you can go and pick tracks and make your own CD online right in the store. So there's a variety of products that are available, and we're certainly competitive in keeping up with all of those different product sources for our bands. But the thing that sets us apart, that makes Infinity a different breed, if you will, from some of the other options that are available, is the fact that we cater to the independent artist. We are very, very interested in supporting independent Christian music, not only from a professional point of view, but also from a spiritual point of view. We feel that independent Christian music is the future for music in our genre. I think it's going to be the future for all music, but it's certainly being felt dramatically in the Christian world. Initially, Christian music has been set up like mainstream music, which is all or nothing sort of mentality. An artist or a label had to get up to the plate and hit a home run or at least a triple if they were going to stay in the game. And translating that to your audience or to the average consumer, if you're not a gold record or if you're not selling hundreds of thousands of units, you're really not worth the time and energy of a major label system or a major label distributor. And so that really narrows the playing field. If you don't have a tremendous amount of money, it doesn't matter how much talent or calling or anointing you feel. If you don't have the funds or someone who believes in you to provide the funds, you just couldn't play in the game. Infinity Music was based upon a model that is emerging as being a very popular model, which is a licensing model. We work with labels and or artists who have already finished their projects. Unlike many distributors, we do not invest in the product being recorded or any of the packaging or any of the pre-release expenses that are normally associated with music. Instead, we focus our energies, efforts, and resources upon the marketing and the distribution expenses related to the project. So for an artist or a band who is contemplating whether they should step into the national arena, we have a program that has variable levels of participation. If you're an established artist, like Michelle Toombs, or I just met with Zoe Girl and several of the artists from that very popular band, Kevin Max from DC Talk. We're working with Donnie McClurkin right now. We're working with Martha Manuzzi. We're working with Juanita Bynum. So whether it's gospel, rock, independent, alternative, inspirational, AC pop, it doesn't really matter. You break down into three basic categories in the distribution world. The first category being established. If you're an established artist, we're going to be able to bring to the table all of the normal co-op marketing programs that they would have experienced in, say, EMI, Word, or Providence systems. We will not be able to provide the label marketing for them, but we will be able to provide the co-op marketing, which is the product's cost to be on the shelf. And we will spend significant amounts of money in production, actually pressing the CDs, making them, actually covering the cost or advancing the expenses for manufacturing. We may advance money for marketing and tour support. We may advance a significant amount of money for the artists themselves, depending on their success and their established nature. I would call that an A-level release in our system. A B-level release is for a label who has resources and has some experience and know-how in releasing projects in the market, and they have between $15,000 and $25,000 to put towards radio promotions, publicity, tour support, etc. That type of a project will get a significant amount of attention in our system, and we will do our best to place it nationally in all of the co-op programs available. And when I'm speaking nationally, I'm really speaking about the Christian marketplace. I'm not really speaking about the mainstream big boxes like Walmart, Target, Best Buy. I'm speaking about Family Christian, Lifeway, which is a Southern Baptist chain, Mardell's, a company called Parable, another company, Berean, etc. There are several chains in the Christian marketplace that have national stores and are owned by a larger company rather than the independent mom and pop stores that would be seen on your local corner wherever you might live. So a B-level release would get a significant amount of national support in our system. We would prioritize that, and typically we'll either do manufacturing advances for them or some co-op marketing advances, but not both. Usually we'll take a smaller amount of risk on a B-level project. On a C-level release, which we call our AAA, if you will, AAA for us would be projects that have promise, that appear to be well produced, well packaged, that have groups of people around them that know what they're doing, and a sizable commitment to touring in the band or the project, but they really don't have a significant amount of resources yet at their disposal. They're maybe just getting started, or they're sort of feeling their way into this calling. And for those artists, we will do a limited release, which has very little responsibility on their part other than to provide a good product for us, and we in turn give a pretty small commitment to support it. In other words, if it sells, we'll sell it for you, and we'll do it regionally, but we're not going to go well out of our way to try and push that into the marketplace for you. We're going to wait for radio to take off, major tour to be signed, some type of publicity that would generate national awareness, and then we'll step in and support that. So those are the three basic levels that we participate in with artists. Well, I think there's a big misconception in the industry, not just Christian music, but in the industry in general, that is, if I have a deal or I'm signed, then my project will most definitely be in Walmart, or it will most definitely be in Best Buy when I go look, where my fans go and try to find it. If you're in the Christian world, well, it's Family and Lifeway, and for sure they're going to be in those stores. And unfortunately, that's just not true. There is a process that separates projects and their demand level. That process is different for each chain. Family Christian music, we have end caps that we can control what goes into those end caps. An end cap is the listening stations typically that you'll walk into a store, and at the end of an aisle there'll be a display with 10 to 12 titles prominently laid out for people to see, and then you'll be able to pick up a pair of headphones and listen to selections from those CDs or watch their videos on a monitor. And those end caps cost money, and they don't literally just happen. So a distributor or a label has gone into those chains and has literally purchased that real estate for a period of time. That process in some chains is just a matter of pay to play, which is if you've got the money, you can have a slot. That's disappearing quickly because there's so many people now coming to the table that want to have their product on an end cap, and there's only 8 to 12 end caps in a store usually, and there's only so much space for a tremendous amount of product being released in the marketplace. So competition for that space has gotten pretty intense. What's interesting to note is during the competition in the last 4 or 5 years, the majors have been losing space in those end caps, and the independents have been gaining space because they're seeing a shift in buying trends from just standard big picture sort of record label deals to actually consumers having a demand for the alternative and the different and unique creative voices of the independents. So, as a result, it is a confusing situation for the independent artist or label to try and sort out on their own. As a distributor, we are very, very aware of the co-op marketing world. It is pretty much what we live and die by. So as a result of the complexities and the changes in the co-op marketing, what I'm saying right now may not be true in 6 months or a year, but that's what's true right now. Generally, those principles will stay true. But co-op marketing, just as a wrap-up point, is when you pay a chain to have your product in its store. And that's a foreign concept to a lot of people. They think those CDs just get there because they're available. And they're not. They're actually purchased. So the distributor will pay on behalf of the artist or label to the retailer a fee, usually thousands of dollars, to have product put in the store. And then that product is only kept in that position for between 5 and 8 weeks, depending on the store and the season of the year that the product may be promoted. So there's the challenge, is to match your co-op marketing timing with radio and touring so that there is a overlap between national awareness on radio and in touring markets with what's actually in the store when it's in the store. And you can begin to see the challenge there of getting those two things to meet. Infinity is, it's a younger company. We're only in our 3rd year of operations, but we're owned by a larger, older parent company known as Central South Distribution. Central South Distribution has really been the dominant market share of gospel and black gospel music for the last 3 decades. We sell for everyone from EMI, Word, Provident, and in the Christian world to, Columbia, Universal, Sony Red, Sony, Fontana, BMG, and pretty much anyone in the world that sells music that is Christian in nature or family friendly, it goes through our doors. So we have a wide access to a tremendous amount of product that's well beyond just our own distributed labels. Infinity is a subset of that bigger system, and Infinity focuses only on Christian music, only in the Christian Booksellers Association, or the CBA. So we're selling to 1,400 to 1,500 stores that are in the United States that are focused completely upon Christian music, and that we have the full gamut from the gospel music to hip-hop to AC pop to rock and roll. I mean, we just really have a wide variety of products that we work with and bands that we've partnered with. Since we're 3 years old, we have started since the digital revolution began, and our planning and setup has always included a digital component. So it doesn't require us to go back in time and sort of catch up. It's something we've been doing from day one. And so we do regularly subscribe to and support almost every major online music retailer that exists. We handle everything from iTunes and Rhapsody on down to Amazon.com to Walmart.com and pretty much everything in between. We digitize in 3 formats. We send it out as we would a new release. We manage that process for bands and labels. We provide royalty reports and payments off of that, just as if we would from retail. A big exception to what we do is we do not intrude upon the artist's personal website, a MySpace page or a shoutlife.com page. We do not interfere with their direct ability to capture sales or revenue to support their ministries online. If it's a retail site, we would really like to have that right to represent them. If it is a personal or ministry-based site, we do not touch or interfere with that. Just as we don't take a percentage or charge for their online, not online, but their road sales, the merch sales that they do as they're touring, we do not interfere with in any way. So that's an important distinction to understand the difference between digital retail and digital personal or digital ministry, and we do not touch those. And it's provided a substantial revenue stream, obviously, for a variety of independent projects. Ironically, we're beginning to think of digital as a really good place for the independent community of Christian artists to launch before they consider finished products and trying to be in the retail world at all. A good way to find out if this is God's timing for your band or your label is to go ahead and work a relationship with an online community like shoutlife.com. I recommend ShoutLife because they're a Christian MySpace, and they're very careful to protect that environment so your fans wouldn't be offended or taken off, advantage of. Yet it maintains a very strong, relevant presence, so your more cutting-edge projects wouldn't be embarrassed to be affiliated with, an older system. But in those realms of digital social networking, there are online stores that you can put your products in that are measured now by SoundScan. CMTA in the summer of 2007 decided to create a category for SoundScan of digital sales as well as digital finished goods. So we can now track objectively how a band or a startup label is doing long before we have to make the financial commitment of pressing up CDs and co-op marketing and things that we've discussed already. So it's a great opportunity for the independent world to take a good, long, hard look at what time of life they're looking at, whether this is a season for them to step into this full time. And digital technology is allowing us to compete evenly. So I'm kind of excited about digital. It doesn't scare me. Digital retail evaluations are constantly being upgraded. I think about every 3 months I see a new article in Billboard or Variety that's saying, okay, this is what the new royalty rate should be. At this moment, I think they've settled. And I think what you're seeing on the 99-cent download from iTunes or Rhapsody, you're basically seeing a 5 to 7% slice that goes to either your sub-distributor or your main distributor. And there's definitely a difference between those. A sub-distributor would be a larger aggregator, is the term that's used in the industry, an aggregator of online content, which places a tremendous volume of product in all of the main portals online for digital downloads. And they're going to charge you between 5 and 7%, sometimes 10% if you're new and nobody knows who you are. And then usually there's another company piggybacked on top of the aggregator that's handling the administrative side of it. So by the time the artist gets a check, if you will, or a PayPal account deposit, you're looking at about 50% of what was actually charged actually getting back to the artist. In our world, we charge 25% for all of the distribution costs and administration that is associated with it. So on a 99-cent download, we're going to get 75 cents, and then we're going to charge 25%. So we're literally giving the artist about 50 cents on the dollar. Now, as our volume builds and our credibility builds within the industry, I expect the artist's share to grow and our costs to go down. So I'm hoping that by the end of 2008, we'll be able to only hold about 12%, maybe even 8%, depending on the volume. And the artist then will be getting somewhere between 60 and 70 cents on a download. There's a tremendous vacuum right now in the Christian music world. And the vacuum is created, I believe, in part by the slow erosion of the larger systems. There used to be a tremendous amount of support for an independent artist if they got signed to a record deal. And a publicist would be assigned to them, and a promoter, tour director, marketing director, radio support, radio solicitation. And so labels were getting a tremendous amount of data that would help them guide a project through its release and help the artist get to the right places at the right time to support it. That has pretty much evaporated in the last 5 years. So There's been a tremendous need for someone to step into this world of Christian music and provide some apparatus for an independent Christian musician to get label-like support without signing away their life. Typically to be with a label deal, you got to give up your publishing, you got to give up ownership of the master, and so the price was just too steep, and the average independent artist just frankly wasn't able to survive with those types of deals. And the label couldn't survive because the average independent artist just wasn't generating enough sales. So I'm not blaming either side of that equation, I'm just sort of observing it. But the reality is, if we're going to be successful in independent Christian distribution, we have to provide resources for those bands to get good information so that they can be successful in what God's called them to do. So to that end, in 2006, we started working very hard to create a para company, or a company alongside of Infinity. It's not a part of Infinity, but it is actually affiliated with Infinity. And the name of the company is Infinity University, or Infinity U. And as the name implies, it's an educational arm that will help independent bands find a place to get answers, to educate them in a practical way on the process of taking a project from production all the way through touring, to just hold their hand, if you will, in a very Christian way. Infinity University is a sort of the brainchild of Brian Harden with Whiplash Records, who I'm actually a partner with, so I have a deep and intimate understanding of the process. Brian and I spent many road trips sort of chewing on the challenges of distribution and the needs for the bands, as well as our bands at Whiplashes. And what we came up with was just a general awareness, and that is, there's a need for someone to take SoundScan data, compare it with the radio BDS reports or the radio play charts from CRW or R&R, and then communicate with the distributor and say, we need product in this region in the United States. If you're getting airplay in Albuquerque, you need the stores in Albuquerque to have that product. You also need to reorient your touring and booking plans to be in the Albuquerque area. You might even want to visit some Albuquerque radio stations while you're there. So what we found as a simple concept was actually quite difficult to pull off, because you're dealing with a tremendously different amount of information coming from a variety of sources, and somebody had to take all that data, figure out how to crunch it, and then put it into a simple summarized form that a band or a manager or a label could just quickly look at and go, oh, this is your top 10 or this is your top 5 markets and you need to be there. And it took us a year of pretty hard work to get enough streamlined to where we could effectively do that. And so we have come up with a system that I believe is pretty close to being fully finished and fully complete in what it offers an artist, that will in effect come alongside of the artist approximately 3 months before their release. It will handle the radio promotions, it'll handle radio servicing, packaging, and it will track radio single for 6 months, probably 2 radio singles for the average band, in multi-format. So it can do AC, CHR, rock, inspo, even AAA college. So there is at least a place I can send artists to now to get reliable, ethical, economical support for releasing a project. And Infinity U has a variety of programs trying to meet the needs of each independent band. But if you do the whole thing, if you were to sign up with Infinity U and have them be your record label for 9 months, 3 months prior to the street date and 6 months after the street date, you would be looking at between $15,000 and $20,000. And those funds are used to secure radio promotions for 2 national singles, secure a full-time publicist to oversee it, and then it gives you a tremendous amount of data twice a month in a report format that will direct your touring, direct your, all of your promotions can be very efficient and focused. And as a distributor, I get that data as well, which helps my sales team to keep those products regionally where they need to be so that a band can, quote, blow up or become known in the industry. And that's really been a missing component to our industry for a long time. It's certainly not meant to replace a top-notch label, but it is a coverage for someone who has nothing but a desire to do what they're called to do. And what we found before we did Infinity U is that people would spend that money and then much more and still have nothing to show for it at the end of a year, because they didn't know what to do with the data they were getting, or they didn't know how to connect their radio promoter with their touring people, and they didn't know how to get the publicist to communicate with the distributor. And so a lot of things were happening for a band, but they weren't actually getting much done. And so we felt like that component of sort of compiling all that information and giving it back to you in a way that you can use is critical, because you've spent a lot of time and money all focused to one specific moment in time. And if things aren't all happening in that one specific moment, you've lost that opportunity maybe for 2 or 3 years until you can gather your resources and do it again. And a lot of labels couldn't survive that. So, it was part spiritual inspiration to help meet a need, and it was also part understanding the business climate and need of the industry at the time. The funny thing about Infinity U, beyond just the professional support, is that we're actually guys that are training to be pastors, so we have a pastor's heart in what we do. And we take our artists, it's optional, but we encourage everyone that participates, or even people who don't participate, but know that they're called to be Christian band or artists, to get together about every 3 months and do a retreat. So we put people in a retreat setting, we allow them to interact with each other, and they can network themselves in a spiritual way, can get fed and affirmed in what they're doing, and get some wise advice from a variety of very ethical Christian professionals that have partnered with us, so that they can get a much safer experience releasing a project than maybe they would have had a few years ago. That's a very common question, which is, where do you see the music industry in 5 to 10 years, and what format will we be listening to music in, and how well will retail systems survive this transition? And you want me to answer that. You want me to give you the answer. And I'll have to go dust off my crystal ball that I keep under the desk, and I'll take a good look at it and get back with you on that. But I can give you some possible scenarios that might actually work out. I don't know what's going to happen. I can tell you this. I know God a little bit. I've been a Christian now for 5.5 years, and I've learned that God always gets things exactly right. There's never been anything that ever surprised God, and there's never been any event that ever caught him off guard or hurt him. He's immutable and he's unstoppable. And when his will is set out, it will be accomplished, the Bible tells us. So in that sense, I'm not worried about independent Christian musicians getting their message out and serving the Lord in the calling that they've been called to. I'm just not worried about that. That will happen, whatever form that is in. Now, Christian music distribution, Christian music retail world, they could be in a little more trouble. I don't know how that's going to roll out. I think we've got another 5 years. I think it's going to be 2011, 12 before we get into devastating effects to the industry's financial ability to survive, at least in the independent world. I think the bigger systems may feel those effects very strongly in 2008. But I think the smaller guys are going to be able to scrap for a while longer. We're going to have to adjust what we're selling. There are different types of products that we're working on that are not the traditional CD that we will be rolling out in 2008. Some of those are digitized projects. Some of those are combining elements of music and ringtones and video data onto one piece of product. And we're also, of course, expanding into the digital download world as well as a distributor. But I think the emerging surprise that could be, quote, joker in the deck, is the fact that a lot of stores are opening online. So as we're seeing brick and mortar stores sort of reduce their quantity of products, reduce their selection of music, there are just as many stores opening up online that are specifically catering to a genre or a demographic. Classic Christian music or hard rock Christian music or punk or pop or whatever. And so people are able to get online and find product that is never going to be available in their independent store. So for the hardcore fan, they find a way. They are going to find this music and they're going to listen to it. What's emerged as a surprise in the distribution world is that each of these storefronts online are suddenly finding themselves needing distribution. Not distribution to the retailer, distribution to the consumer. They need a warehouse and they need a place to ship product from beyond the garage that they've been working out of in their home. And so suddenly we have a whole new growth avenue as a Christian company of beginning to provide support for storefronts or ministries that are expanding their product, and they have nowhere to put it or any safe way to ship it or reliably bill for it or invoice, or all of those details are pretty complicated when you get into volume situations. So we're finding ourselves doing more and more fulfillment services for online stores. That's a niche market that we didn't even know existed. So I think that's just one example, but I think you're going to see that Christian distributors and Christian-based music companies are going to survive just fine, but they're going to do it in a different way than they've done it before. Deciding whether you want to be in the business or career of Christian music is a loaded question as well. It's not a simple answer. If you're asking, are you wanting to be a label, that is a much bigger question with much more detail than if you're just asking, is God calling me full time to be a music minister and sell CDs and tour full time instead of being a postman or whatever. Those are difficult questions to discern. And my immediate response would be, find your pastor. Go to your pastor. Go to your youth group leader. Go to your parents. Find someone who is spiritually more mature. Find someone who has a few more years on their belt, and run this by them. And not just as a calling issue, not just as a, am I anointed and do I have the talent, but are the pieces in place? Are there support people that are feeling led to do this beyond your parents? Are there people in your church who have recognized this in you and say, yes, you need to do this? Is your pastor sensing this is the right season and that the right people are alongside of you to get this done? These are really important issues that I find a lot of bands and labels rush through the process. I have a pastor at my church who's been very helpful in my own world of making good decisions. His name's Scott Weaver at New Song Christian Fellowship in Cool Springs, Tennessee. And Scott always challenges us with this thought, and that is, spend most of your time on the what and a little bit of time on the how. And what I find is most Christian artists and labels spend a lot of time on the how and very little, if any, time on the what question. So I would encourage anyone who's considering stepping into Christian music, whether as a label or an independent artist, to surround themselves with good counsel and to not separate their business minds from their church minds, if you will, not compartmentalizing their faith away from their calling. Because if you're going to step into Christian music, I believe you have to have a spiritual mindset, not a business mindset. But I don't believe you're going to be successful if you don't incorporate both.